All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. I am Deborah Dempsey. I'm here joined with Taylor Michelini. I am ProAct's Chief Operating Officer, and today we are going to be talking about drug trends. We're really looking forward to bringing this information to you. I'll let Taylor introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Taylor Michelini. I'm ProAct's Director of Clinical Operations and very excited to be here today. So, Deb, I think we'll just jump right into it. I think a hot topic that both you and I talk about every single day is GLP-1s. And so, of course, it's going to be how we're going to start this podcast out today. From your perspective, what signals are we seeing that this is not just a fad anymore and that this is going to be something that's here to stay and something that we need to think about long term?
Great question, because over the last several years, we've continued to see growth in the GLP-1 market, both for the treatment of diabetes and for weight loss. I think what we're starting to see now is the market is maturing, and we're starting to see some leveling off of that growth. Of course, the spend is still pretty excessive, and is definitely impacting our plan sponsors' plan spend, and it's really important that we have a good strategy in place. But the good news is I think we're starting to see some of that growth start to level off. Now, of course, we are seeing some new indications being added to these medications. We're also seeing new drugs come to market, different dosage forms in the GLP-1 space. So I think overall what we will see is that even though the growth is slowing and we are seeing some pricing concessions from the manufacturers because of the way in which these drugs are being used, the expanded indications and new drugs that are coming to market, we probably won't see much relief on the plan sponsor spend side. What are some of the things that you are seeing plan sponsors do to manage spend in this category? What should they be doing, considering the fact that these drugs are not going away?
I think we have a lot of different options, and it really depends on the client that we're looking at. When it comes to the GLP-1 management, the first is, of course, utilization management, prior authorizations, really making sure that we're reviewing these medications and that they're being used in the right way for the right patients. And then having, additional support, chronic disease management. ProAct excitingly partnered with Omada Health at the beginning of this year. So having some sort of program like that to really help drive healthy lifestyle changes that can be sustained is truly an important aspect of this category, but also others, within the pharmacy industry. Flexibility and coverage. So especially on that weight loss side of the GLP-1 category, how do we, tailor the plan design for the client and meet their needs to some extent? So, increasing the BMI requirement slightly, or looking at some of the new hot topics in this space of direct-to-consumer programs is something that's coming up in the media quite frequently lately. So, I think the importance of having options and knowing what your client, what their intention is of covering these medications.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with additional measures around making sure that we're looking at lifestyle modifications and behavioral changes. I'm really excited about the Omada program because I think that helps incorporate not only making sure the right patients are getting on the medication, but then managing those patients and eventually, hopefully, transitioning them off the medication, and so that those lifestyle modifications and behavioral changes can really do what the medication is doing in the future. So really excited about Omada and being able to introduce that offering to be able to support our diabetic and pre-diabetic patients and making sure the right patients get on GLP-1s and that they're used appropriately in conjunction with lifestyle modifications and behavioral changes, and then looking at opportunities for those patients to eventually transition off with the support of a program like Omada. So also on that topic, what are some of the guardrails that you see being put into place by plans to help control spend and manage?
I think what really moves the needle and really helps control is just getting back to basics and that utilization management. And here at ProAct, we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years or so of looking at what the criteria is that we are requiring for these medications to, again, make sure that the right patients are getting the right medications. So, on the diabetic side, do they have that type 2 diabetes diagnosis? Do they have the labs to support that? Is there the A1C levels that are appropriate for a diabetic diagnosis? And have they, had the appropriate steps in treatment before jumping to that GLP-1 medication? On the weight loss side, looking at that BMI requirement and then also ensuring that they have attempted those lifestyle modifications before we are prescribing them the, highly utilized, highly costly medications in this category. So,
how are you seeing plan sponsors balance that, the barrier of the patient getting these products versus making sure the right patient is getting these products?
I think, and this comes into play every single day, that balance of doing what's right for the patient, but also taking into account the cost. And these are expensive medications that truly are impacting plans across the industry. So really trying to find that balance. And I do think it also depends on the client and what their intention is and what they're comfortable with. And I think we do a really good job here at Proactive finding that balance and kind of working with the clients individually to do what's best for their patients. These medications work. I mean, there's no question about that.
Absolutely.
And they can impact their long-term health outcomes for years. So, it's not that we don't want these medications to be used. They are here for a very good reason. We just need to make sure that they're being used appropriately.
Just in general, the indication of diabetes and the diagnosis of diabetes, whether it's because of the overall awareness with these new products, is growing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a very important category to watch.
Let's shift gears a little bit. So, of course, the GLP-1s are the, main topic of the diabetic space, but we're starting to see some more information and more attention come down from a technology perspective. Can you tell us a little bit more about that today?
Yeah, so in the realm of diabetes, I think we're looking at other ways we can manage our diabetic patients to ensure that, they are managed appropriately and we're keeping their A1Cs and their plasma glucose levels in the appropriate ranges. We are seeing increased utilization of insulin pumps, specifically tubeless insulin pumps. So an example is like the Omnipod products, and then further layering onto that is in conjunction with those insulin tubeless pumps like Omnipod is continuous glucose meters. And so there's a lot of technology that's coming out that essentially combines the two together that allows for patients that have diabetes to wear an insulin pump. It's very discreet, very easy to wear, and it connects with a continuous glucose monitor, so their glucose levels are being constantly monitored and then can make adjustments in real time versus, the standard, before meal dosing or just before bedtime type of dosing. So this allows patients a lot more flexibility and a lot more control, which equals better health outcomes. I think we'll start to see more insulin pumps, the tubeless version specifically, coming to market, different manufacturers competing with the Omnipod product because of the success that Omnipod has had in this space. And I think we'll continue to see ways in which technology advances kind of the communication between the pump and between the continuous glucose monitor, and then the addition of the smartphone, of course, adding in that smartphone capability, which then allows the patient to have full control over and understanding and visibility to their glucose levels at any point in time in the day. Now, of course, this does come with added spend. Considerations need to be taken into account, and what this will do to overall plan spend. Again, it's something that we know has been validated to improve patient health outcomes. So it's important that plan sponsors keep this in mind as we move forward with more technological advances in this space. I think that the competition in the insulin tubeless insulin pump space will help some, but I think with expanding indications, initially they were only approved for type 1 diabetes. Now we're seeing type 2 and gestational diabetes. And then just overall more awareness of these products and ease of use, and just the advantages that the smartphone and continuous glucose monitor integration has. That will definitely be a factor in this coming year and in future years in the diabetic space.
I think you made a lot of great points when it comes to the advances that we're seeing in the technology space for diabetes. Historically, when a patient is diagnosed as a diabetic, it can really impact their daily life. And I think with these advances of the different pieces of technology that we're seeing, it's really helping them continue their life as is, and it's not truly, changing what they can do day in and day out. So I think that's going to really drive some really good health outcomes in the future for these patients. We've talked about brand medications. We've talked about the technology. Of course, they all come with a price tag. Is there any relief coming from like a generic, pipeline for diabetes?
So we do expect some generics to be introduced in 2026 in the diabetic space. The generics that should launch this year are in a category of diabetic medications called DPP4 inhibitors. And so although these can be effective in treating type 2 diabetes, unfortunately, they're not first line. So our first line agents are metformin-containing products, GLP-1s, which we've already talked about, and then this other drug category called SGLT2s. When an individual fails those medications, then a DPP4, like a Januvia or Janumet, may be introduced. So although it is going to provide some relief, and we do certainly have utilization of those brand name drugs across our population, it will not be super significant in the way that it would be if a GLP-1 or an SGLT2 launched a generic product. So it's good news, but it's, like I said, not first-line therapies at this point coming to market as a generic.
So we'll still have to have some good ways of controlling that GLP-1 category, for sure.
Absolutely, yep.
Shifting gears a little bit, and I've already mentioned this concept briefly, already in the podcast, but a really hot topic lately is really the concept of direct-to-consumer programs. What can you tell me about those?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of conversation about the direct-to-consumer programs, especially with the introduction of the TrumpRx.gov website, which essentially connects patients with drug manufacturers that participate in a direct-to-consumer program. The direct-to-consumer programs can be accessed directly through the drug manufacturer's website, or if they are collaborating with the TrumpRx.gov program, members, patients can reach those direct-to-consumer programs all in one site. Interestingly enough, if a member is going through the TrumpRx.gov program, there is no insurance accepted. So it's a completely cash program. So it processes outside of the plan. It is at a lower discounted price, but what we are tending to see is that when you compare the direct-to-consumer prices, whether it be through the manufacturer's website or the government website offering, they're not a lot less expensive than that same drug through the commercial plan after rebates. So that's something to consider. And these programs really are designed for that cash-paying patient that maybe doesn't have drug coverage at all. We're also seeing that they are introducing some medications on the TrumpRx.gov website that are brand name medications that actually have generic medications available already. So in those situations, really it makes more sense for a member to take the generic medication, which is lower cost. And then we also see some acute medications like antibiotics and things like that, which aren't maintenance medications. So they may not have a super big impact because those are kind of one-time use medications. We have seen the introduction of some fertility medications on these direct-to-consumer websites, which is beneficial because, as you know, a lot of plan sponsors don't always cover fertility medications. So that is something that, maybe one of our members through commercial insurance wouldn't have access to otherwise, but through this direct-to-consumer offering, they can get it at a much lower discounted price. So there's definitely some advantages and benefits, but there's definitely some opportunities as well. So I think the jury's still out, and as more drugs, continue to look at ways to market directly to consumers, we'll continue to see how that plays out. But I think that overall shift of looking at, the drug costs, brand name drug costs with rebates in consideration versus that cash price is going to pretty much be fairly even. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about biosimilars. We opened up the conversation with GLP-1s, which is a huge hot topic. The other thing I think we're often asked a lot, probably the second or first biggest topic of conversation is biosimilars and what role are they playing currently in, patients' therapy, but also overall plan spend. How do we best take advantage of these biosimilar products? What are you seeing as far as biosimilars, in 2025, moving into 2026, is how they're impacting our patients and our plan sponsors?
So I think we've kind of just experienced two waves of two really big, medications have biosimilars become available. So Humira and then Stelara. And so looking back at 2025 versus 2026, Humira was the first to kind of go through that process. And there was some hesitation from, patients, but also providers of transitioning these patients to the biosimilar when they've been established on Humira therapy for potentially years. These patients are ones that probably went through a lot to, first of all, figure out what was going on and be diagnosed. And then it also usually takes a lot of time to figure out a medication that's going to work. And so that's where that hesitation came. And it was well warranted initially. It's hard to go to a patient and ask them to transition off of a medication that they know that works. So I think we found some of those, or we experienced some of those bumps along the way for the Humira transition. Stelara, these are the same doctors, same offices, a lot of the same diagnoses that we experienced all of this with Humira. So now that we're kind of living through this transition period for Stelara to the biosimilars, it's much more of a smoother process, and we're seeing adoption rates much higher than we did with Humira earlier on. We definitely got there with the Humira population. It just took a little bit more time. So I think that's kind of the story we've seen over the last few years, and there's many more coming. So I think the importance of having some sort of biosimilar first or biosimilar program in place to really help transition these members to a lower cost option. This can save plans upwards of 80% transitioning from that brand product to the biosimilar. So it's definitely an important part of the management that a PBM should play for a plan sponsor. And we've spent a lot of time looking at the best approach, and through formulary management, through utilization management, and really preferring those biosimilars first is really important for our plans, and also taking into account what's best for the patients as well.
I know you mentioned Humira and Stelara, really big names in the anti-inflammatory space. Are there any other biosimilars that are coming soon, maybe not in the anti-inflammatory space?
Yeah, so there's a very rich pipeline coming, but the two that really stand out to me is Xolair. This is a medication that's used in asthma patients and also some allergy conditions. And then Eylea is a medication used in different eye disorders like retinopathy. So definitely more coming. And I feel very confident with how PROACT has put into place our biosimilar approach, that as more and more of these are introduced to the market, we will have a seamless transition for our members to go from that high cost brand name medication to that biosimilar to help save some money.
So on the biosimilar topic, biosimilars are specialty medications. We're going to see some savings, hopefully with the introduction of more biosimilars. But what are some new specialty medications that are coming out that we need to keep an eye on, from a spend perspective?
I think the last few years, the common theme is, of course, been very high cost medications. So we're looking at orphan medications. So these are medications that don't currently have any other, that treat indications or diagnoses that don't have any other medications on the market. So this is the first therapy that would be able to treat this indication. Oncology is, of course, another big topic and another big category within that specialty pipeline, specifically breast cancer, gene therapies. Those are those very, very high cost therapies that typically are one-time administrations, but come with a very, very high price tag. Narcolepsy is an indication that is kind of popping up in the specialty pipeline. There are a few medications that are available, but this will give that patient population some other options in treatment. And then we also have our first oral IL-23 inhibitor for plaque psoriasis. So historically, all of the medications have been injectables. So giving those patients an oral option, I think, will be great. And give them, just a different option for therapy.
I read somewhere about a new gene therapy that actually treats hearing loss. I'm sure it's very expensive, but it's just really exciting to see what technology and medicine together are doing to treating some of these things that, we thought were incurable. So it's really exciting from that standpoint, but also, the cost is very concerning. So it's just something, that we need to make sure that our plan sponsors are aware of and prepared for, and have strategies in place, as these new drugs are coming to market, and how they'll be handled from that standpoint. But on the last topic of conversation, I just wanted to touch upon, on that pricing standpoint, Medicare fair negotiation pricing. So I know that we are in the commercial space, and so we don't have a direct impact on these maximum fair prices that are coming down in the federal government space. But I think there is some questions and curiosity from our plan sponsors on like what does the maximum fair price negotiations mean on the commercial side. And what I'm seeing is that these price changes and negotiations in the Medicare space can probably have two impacts in the commercial space. Either one, the drug manufacturer is going to lower their list price for everybody, which is great. We want to see lower list price, but what that ultimately means is that the rebates offerings on these medications will go away. So really, is it a win net? I think it is, because I think upfront costs are going to be lower versus waiting for those rebate payments to be made. But I think also for the drug manufacturers that don't decide to lower their list price and just lower it in accordance with Medicare rules and regulations, they could potentially look to try to make up some of that loss in revenue on the commercial side. So I think we're just going to have to be, very mindful and aware of, what's happening and how we react to whatever the manufacturer's strategy is on these medications that are included in the maximum fair price negotiations.
I feel like we're in a pivotal moment of the PBM industry where a lot is changing. There's a lot of information coming down very quickly, and it's exciting. We can't continue to do things how we've done it in the past. We need to pivot, and we need to look at different ways of helping our members and helping our plan sponsors, which I'm excited for. So.
Yeah, I think we are going to continue. One of the other trends is just seeing a lot of change in how our PBM programs offerings are going to change and evolve to kind of meet what the industry expectations are. And it is exciting to see how we can adapt and evolve and, make sure we're still providing significant value to our plan sponsors and making sure that our patients that we are treating and caring for have the best patient health outcomes possible. So conversations like we're having today, I think, are extremely important to talk about what we're seeing, what we're doing, and sharing that information with our partners and our plan sponsors so that they can be more informed to make the best decisions going forward. So thank you for listening to our session today. We really appreciate the attention. We actually have some additional resources available if you're interested. As always, please follow us on LinkedIn. We like to share information, clinical updates, drug trends there, as well as annually we publish our drug trends report, which should be out soon. It always comes out the spring of each year, and I think you'll find a lot of valuable information there as well about PROACT specific trends as well as industry trends and how we're overall performing against those. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.